you doing, everybody? Another edition of Legend Sports and Amplify, and we are talking baseball history and minor league history and collecting and card art, you name it. And I'm really happy this afternoon to have on with us from Baseball and Ice Cream and author Paul Caputo. How you doing, Paul?
Philip, I am doing very well. How are you doing? I'm also here with my
I see.
15-year-old very grumpy cat, Yodel. So thanks for having me here. I am looking forward to it.
All right, awesome. This is great. I really appreciate you coming on here. Talking some minor league and baseball history. I think it'll be this will be a lot of fun. I've tried to have on as I was telling you before we get started here. I started this as an effort to try to help a little bit with rebooting the Negro League Baseball Museum and that effort after the pandemic and since then I have met so many really cool people between authors and historians, researchers, and now into with the baseball Negro League Baseball Marketplace, the Josh Gibson Award, all the card artists involved with that, and now into collectors and minor league baseball and I love minor league baseball and we'll talk about that, but all of this has been so much fun to get people in front of maybe a new audience because I'm trying to post these in a lot of different places, and you get your stories out there and why you're baseball fans and how you get into doing what you're doing. So like I said, I love origin stories. So tell us a little bit about you and how you got into what you're doing here.
Well, I guess I mean that's a really good question, and I guess what I'm doing probably boils down to the writing that I'm doing about minor league baseball. And you said you're into origin stories. I like
Mm,
writing about the origins of minor league baseball logos.
awesome.
Um, and that is something, it's something I started doing on my own blog. I would tell you the name of it, but if I told you the name of it, I'm afraid you'd actually try to look it up. And I let that URL expire and it got bought up by some sort of insidious forces out there. So I don't want to
Sure.
direct anyone there
Boy, oh boy,
by
I've
accident.
seen that happen. Boy, that's a
Oh
nightmare.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yep.
But the reason I let it expire is because I started writing for my own blog, and it was not getting very much traction, but it did get noticed by Chris Creamer of SportsLogos.net,
Yep.
and he said, "Hey, you should come write about this stuff for my site." And I was already a fan of Chris's and a fan of his site,
Awesome.
and so I was obviously thrilled to jump at that opportunity. But I mean, what I was doing is, I'm a Phillies fan,
Me
and
too.
uh, well, I'm a little concerned about your choice of shirt there today, Philip.
I
But
got a Yankee shirt on today. I know, right?
yeah, I heard you talking about Mike Schmidt on your last episode with Ed from the Dad Hats.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but anyway, obviously the height of Phillies fandom for me was in 2008, and they won the World Series, and they clung to some of that glory the following years, and then it sort of slowly trailed off and ended with Ryan Howard's Achilles exploding against the Cardinals in the 2011, I guess. So it was at that point, the Phillies entered another of their many sort of long dark periods, and so I started interesting myself in baseball with the minor leagues, and right around that time was when you started seeing a lot more of these sort of wacky nicknames and the wacky logos and the sort
Hmm.
of the grandiose ones. And the one that really caught my attention the first time was the Lehigh Valley Iron Pigs, who I'm
Hmm.
wearing right now.
You sure
Um,
are.
they debuted in Allentown in 2008, and I thought, okay, that's a wacky nickname. I wonder what that means. Why is there
Hmm.
a steel pig who
Yep.
is a logo for a minor league baseball team? And as growing up in Pennsylvania, and as you know, in eastern Pennsylvania, they're famous for the steel mills where they forged pig
Hmm.
iron. And
Hmm.
so they just, working with Brandiose, they figured they flopped the pig iron into iron pigs, and it became one of minor league baseball's more popular logos. And so I realized all of these minor league baseball logos out there have interesting stories, right? Like they all minor league logos, I think more than major league logos, are really hyper
Hmm.
specific and hyper local, and they all tell really fun stories about the place. And so I developed this theory that you could tell the history of America by understanding why minor league baseball teams have the names that they have. And I started calling minor league baseball teams and saying, is there someone I could talk to about why you're called what you're called? And minor league baseball folks, I have found, are extremely accessible. They didn't know who I was, and especially when I was writing for my own blog instead of Chris's site, I would call them up and I'd be like, "My name's Paul, and I write a blog. Is there someone there I could talk to about why you're called what you're called?" And usually, even though minor league baseball people are very busy, they're also very accessible, and usually they'd say, "Yeah, we'll put you on with our general manager, or we'll put you on with, okay, this was, 20 years ago when we changed our name, so we're going to have you talk to this person." And so I talked to front office folks from minor league baseball teams, and I talked with designers, like Brandios. Jason Klein knows my number when I'm calling, right? Like Jason Klein with Brandios. That's Brandios is doing the lion's share of the work in rebranding a lot of minor league baseball teams. He works with a partner, Casey White, but I've never spoken with Casey because Casey's the sort of the silent partner. Jason does all of their press work. Dan Simon of Studio Simon in Louisville, Kentucky, he's done some great ones. He's responsible for the Savannah Bananas and the Cedar Rapids Colonels, and the Daytona Tortugas is one of my favorites, and so he's done a lot of work. And then Todd Radom, who is has worked with professional, he's worked with in the majors. He's done some really high end work. Just takes my phone calls, right? Like he didn't know who I was before I started calling him, and he's responsible for one of my all time favorites, the Brooklyn Cyclones. And so so I just, I've really enjoyed that the people in minor league baseball have been really accessible, and the stories of the names of the teams are almost always really interesting, and I always learn things when I end up on the phone with a minor league baseball team.
That is beautiful, man. That is good stuff. It's exactly kind of the experience that I've been having trying to talk to some of these authors, researchers. Yeah, people something they want to tell you the story and that's really a lot of fun, right? I mean, especially when you can have access to some of this information that other people really think is cool,
Yeah.
but maybe don't know about how to go about getting it. So yeah,
Right.
that is really cool. I actually reached out to Chris a couple of weeks back because I came across that article that you wrote about Portland and the Rosebuds.
Oh yeah.
And I put something out on Twitter. Every day on Twitter, I try to put something out that's
Yeah.
I hope people find interesting, and maybe they
Sure.
might tell one other person and that kind of thing,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
And so I came across that article you wrote, and didn't realize I was reading through it, and he said, "Hey, why don't you just email?" He actually gave me your email address to email, but
Okay.
then I got talking to Ed, and it's been I have the schedule. I have a couple of weeks that I've been coming on, so I had it in my back of my mind to try to get you to come on here at some point anyway, from talking from that email with Chris,
We were
and so
fated to be on
yeah,
this
no,
call together today.
I think it's great, and I love. I have a box full. I don't know if you heard this little story I told Ed the other night, but you probably run into this because you're a collector of things like this, right? My wife is always telling me, hey, uh, like for example, when we moved a couple of years ago was a great example. But if we're doing some cleaning of the garage or the attic or whatever, I'll start pulling boxes down, right? And then of course I have to look to see what's in them.
Oh yeah.
And then I'll come across stuff that maybe some of it I haven't seen in a while, and I end up wasting more time going, "Wow, look at this! This is so cool! Check this out!" And she's like, "What do you keep it for?" And because you know what, it all tells a story. I mean, it's really what's fun about all this stuff. I mean, you've got behind you, and I was going to show that little video, but you've illustrated it. You've got behind you. That's a myriad of stories right there. That is just really a lot of fun.
So, well, yeah. So you're talking about the Helmet Sunday collection, which
Yes.
I moved into this house in December of 2019, and I actually, when I had the basement finished, I talked with the contractor, and I showed him the helmets, and I was like, I need a shelf for these helmets, and he's like, okay, we can put in like 3-4 feet, and I'm like, no, 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 you don't understand how many helmets there are.
Three,
So
four feet.
there's about there's about 300 of them,
Wow.
and I have to say, I mean, by way of caveat, I have to say that my collection, I know for a fact, it's not the largest out there. I interact with a lot of other collectors, and I have seen their collections, and so there's a handful of us out there really having fun with this. But my interest in them really is, I
Hmm.
love the logos. I love how fun minor league baseball is. I love telling these stories, right? Like when I have a visitor here, they'll come down and they at
Yes.
the far end of the wall on the other side of the ping pong table. That's all the major league ones, right? Like I
Hmm.
start with the American League, go with the National League, and then you can see the sort of individual stacks. It's American League, National League, Triple A, Double A, High A, Low A, Independent Professional, and then Collegiate Summer level. So I've got them organized that way, and almost always, people will start at the far end and they'll be like, okay, 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 and then when by the time they get to Triple A, they're like, oh, what's this one? What's this one? What's this one? What's this story here? And so, it really is every single one of those logos is something that prompts someone to say, well, like this is goofy. Why is there a goat chewing on a baseball bat, right? Like, so, so I get to tell the story of the Hartford Yard Goats, which is one of my favorites, right? Like,
Hmm.
Yard Goat is a nickname for switcher locomotives. And so the Hartford Yard Goats,
Wow.
they've got the Hartford, I always forget the name of it, but there's the famous railroad there in Connecticut, and they've got the Hartford New Haven something railroad. And I apologize to everyone who knows that railroad history better than I do, but the railroad history is important to Hartford. Yard goat is a nickname for railroad switchers, the locomotive switchers, and so they took that nickname, that slang term for a railroad term, and turned it into an actual goat chewing on a baseball bat. And it's also one of the most popular
Hmm.
nicknames out there in minor league baseball. So, the reason for the helmets, and I have to admit, people always ask this question. No, I have not eaten ice cream out of every single one of those. Sometimes they just show up in the mail. Sometimes I find them on eBay. Sometimes, I'll trade them with other collectors. But it's really actually, it's genuinely funny where, I really have been amazed at how friendly and generous strangers on Twitter are. Because, I'll post pictures of the collection and I'll have people email me and they'll say, do you have a Worcester Red Sox? Do you have the Woo Sox yet? This is the one that happened to me
Awesome.
most recently. Do you have the Woo Sox from the minor league guy? I want to make sure I give a shout out to the minor league guy on Twitter. He's sending me a Woo Sox helmet out of the kindness of his heart, right?
Cool.
So, um, this happens all the time. So this is how the collection has really grown. But to me, the thing I love about it is just getting to tell those stories about the logos and about minor
Hmm.
league baseball.
So you've got over 300 now.
Yeah.
What was the first one that you had?
I would go get it for you, but it's way on the other side of the room. It's a maroon Phillies one with the white P on it that I got at Veteran Stadium back in my youth. It was
Where'd you grow up in
back.
Pennsylvania?
My dad taught at Villanova University, so I grew up
Okay.
just outside of Philadelphia,
Okay.
in Wayne, Pennsylvania.
Awesome. I know exactly where that is. I'm not too far. I grew up in Old Forge, which,
Okay.
if you've ever been up to Northeast PA, you can Google this. I'm not making this up. Google the pizza capital of the world. It's a little town of 5,000 6,000 people that it's been around since the 1800s. But there's more pizza restaurants per capita than you can possibly imagine, and it's square Sicilian, and it's just the best pizza you'll ever
That's
have. But
that.
but they actually patented that pizza capital of the world,
It
which
sounds
is
like
pretty funny.
heaven. Pizza capital of the
Oh,
world
if
sounds like
you
heaven.
they'll ship it all over if you ever want if you want to if you ever wanted to order. I recommend Ravello's or Caro and Janelle's. Salerno's. They're all very good, but
All right.
it's great. It's square Sicilian. Anyway, so I grew up there, and so I'm familiar with what you're talking about, and that was I'd probably have a little ice cream helmet. I know I have a Phillies maroon helmet back. See, my team was 1980. I mean, I was
Absolutely.
still I think I was 11, yeah, in 1980, and that was the first World Series ever. I mean, it just
Yeah.
was like you couldn't even imagine Philly fans up there that
No.
that
Well, I was seven. I was seven in 1980, and so I was there, and that was obviously a huge deal in my family. And then the Eagles made it to the Super Bowl, several months later. So it
that's
was
right.
it was quite the stretch for Philadelphia sports fans. But yeah, that's the very first helmet, and how I held on to it because I didn't really start collecting them, the helmets until probably about 10 years ago. Um, I was at Wrigley actually, and they were it was the first really sort of custom helmet I had seen. They were doing a 100th anniversary of Wrigley celebration all year long, and they had a helmet Sunday commemorating that particular anniversary. So it was. I remember looking at it and thinking, well, this would be fun to start, getting a few of these, and then I actually started doing a minor league baseball road trip with my with some college buddies. There's still 8 or 10 of us. We do it every year. We call it Baseball Palooza, and I really started building up my list of minor league baseball stadiums that I've been to, and they almost all, especially at the higher levels, will sell ice cream and a helmet with their own logo on it. Every once in a while, you run into a team that sells their they sell either they don't have the helmets or they use their parent clubs or something like that. But for the most part, I would be able to get the helmets at these games when I went with these friends, and then I started posting them on Facebook and Twitter, and people started sending them to me, and then that's how this happened.
And that, all these stories, and I had that same goal. I was going to go to as many games as I possibly could, but then you know what happens, right? You get married, you have kids, if things get in the way, right? But maybe one day I'll get back out there and start doing it again. But
Well,
the
mine went sort of the reverse. I ended up getting divorced, and I was just like, oh well, hey,
yeah,
there's
you got
minor
more
league
time.
baseball out there.
Yeah. So, but the thing about the minor leagues, besides like you pointed out, I mean that connection to the community is just, I mean, they're telling you so much about it just by their nicknames, which is really a lot of fun. But um, that and then Negro League history going back through the
Yes.
barnstorming and how it spread the baseball brand all over the place to every little corner of the country, and that's I think more people need to appreciate that. I think it's something that the major leagues now is at the level where they are who they are, but
Yeah.
it's the minor leagues and these small independent leagues and the college summer leagues and it's for a lot of factors, the
Yeah.
affordability, the fun aspect of going to a game, because there's all kinds of. What's the craziest minor league promotion that you've seen or have you heard about? Because there's some wild ones out there that I
Yeah.
have seen.
Um, yeah, there's some really fun ones, and they get a lot of notice. The one that comes up, I think, the most often that I think is really funny is the Lehigh Valley Iron Pigs again, and not to focus on them too much, but they a few years back did a prostate cancer awareness night, and they gave out foam finger we're number one foam fingers to everyone with a prostate cancer awareness logo on them. So I think and they also had that same night they had in the urinals they had like targets and they were measuring like strengths of flow and that. So it got a little bit off color, but that's
Oh my
that's the
God.
one that I hear that whenever that question gets asked, that's the one that pops to mind immediately.
Oh my goodness. So when did
Yeah.
when did you start? How long back was it that you got in with working with a little bit with sports logos? How long ago was that?
So I started writing for Chris back in 2014. So I'd only been doing my blog for about a year, and he sort of messaged me out of the blue, and he just said, "Hey, I've been seeing your blog, and would you like to come write for me?" And so that was when I had only written a handful of these articles at this point, maybe 10 or 15, and so I was trying to write, at that time, I was writing basically one article a week on the story behind the nickname. And so
Mm.
I was, I'd call a team during the week and I would do an interview and write the article and I would post it, every Saturday basically. And then when college football season hit, I moved it to Sunday. And then when the NFL hit, I moved it back to Saturday. So I was doing one article a week and then sort of ran out of origin stories to tell, right? I mean, there's so many teams out there. And there are still going to be stories to be told. There's a lot. There are new teams popping up. There are rebrands. the entire Appalachian League just rebranded because they lost their affiliated status, and so
Mm.
now they're an independent collegiate summer level league, including the Danville Otterbots. Um, so they are the
Otterbots.
Otterbots because the the otters. You have the Danville River right there, and you've got the otters are obviously important to the community, but they're also a big STEM education center, and they've got a big sort of science element to their community, and so they wanted to combine the sort of focus on science education with this proximity to nature. And so that's how they ended up being the otter bots rather
That
than
is
just,
awesome.
river otters. So there's always going to be new stories to tell, right? Like
Yeah.
that's definitely
And then they come up with some of these themes that Ed pointed out the other day about the Copa. Some
yes,
of those are just so much fun. I mean, my goodness. I
yes.
mean, I have someone on the hunt for to get me a flying chanclas
Oh
um,
yeah, yeah.
shirt or a hat because I gotta have one.
These brands, most of these Copa brands could absolutely be permanent brands for teams. They could
Yeah.
absolutely.
My
Um,
my wife is originally from Guadalajara, and so we know full well what the flying chancla around our house represents. So it was just, I mean, she'll love it. I can get her that,
that's
and
fantastic.
I think she would love it.
I've been to I've been to a few Albuquerque Isotopes games, and on one of the nights that I was there, they were doing it was one of their I think five mariachis nights,
No
and
way.
that mariachis brand actually won the Fun Cup, the Copa de la Diversión, actually won that a couple of times. The first two times they made it an official contest, the Isotopes won. And the mariachis brand is great, right? Like it's
Hmm.
a fantastic. I love the logo, and so I, of course, am loaded up. This is the thing. I mean, I'm sure branding and marketing and selling merchandise is part of it, in addition to reaching out to Spanish speaking fans. Um, but man, they really do double their ability to sell merchandise,
Hmm.
right? 'Cause I went to a Columbus Clippers game and I bought one of the Valeros shirts that they had, and so yeah, the Copa marketing is really pretty brilliant, to be
It
honest.
really is.
And
Yeah, I love it. I want to get your be. I want to. We'll put a shameless plug in for Chris and sports logos because
okay,
I want people to see your work that's out there, and
great.
we'll talk about your book as well. But before we get to that, I wanted to get your take on. Uh, People have been really dumping recently on the All-Star uniforms that are coming out for the Major League Baseball All-Star game, and when I first saw it, I have to admit, it looked a little odd to me. I mean, the first thing I thought was it looked like a soccer jersey to me, and then it dawned on me that maybe that's what why because there are a lot of Hispanic Latin players playing now. They're trying to grow fan bases. What's your take on those jerseys? I mean, they could have probably backed off on a little some of the things they did with it, but what do you think
There,
of them?
well, so what I wonder is, did they use a design that they had already mocked up for Atlanta? Because
Uh,
Atlanta is so you see the three-letter ATL,
mm-hmm.
so it felt to me at first like maybe we were seeing jersey designs that had already been mocked up, because it's I know that Colorado came out with, or Major League Baseball came out with a Colorado themed All Star logo fairly quickly after making that switch. But usually these logos and these uniforms take literally years to do well and to factor in, you know,
Mm.
all the different permutations and applications for designing a logo. So my first thought is, okay, this is something that they were planning for Atlanta and they just switched it over and they're using it in Colorado. Um, my second thought is, these uniforms were pretty widely panned in social media, and
Mm-hmm.
I think, I try not to be the, my background's in graphic design, and so I try not to be that sort of stereotypical graphic designer who just bags on the work of other graphic designers, because I feel like that's something you see a lot. Um, but I don't think that these. I think the reason that these uniforms are not being well received is that they are pretty poorly designed. I think
Mm-hmm.
they're way too busy, um, and I think that they're just sort of complicated and confusing, and they don't really have a strong baseball feeling about them. They don't have a strong baseball
Mm-hmm.
theme about them. And like you said, it feels like they were almost more soccer jerseys than baseball jerseys, and it's sort of,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, it feels that way. And I've seen the other thing is I've seen some mock-ups on social media for things that they could have done that I thought, man, those are great. I'd buy one of those, and these are just sort of like, fan designed, concepts basically.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a shame, because I live in Fort Collins, Colorado. I'm about an hour north of Denver, and I would, I'm interested in the fact that the game is here, and I'm glad that it's here. Uh, but I wish, and I think the logo is good. I actually think
Mm-hmm.
the All Star logo is good. I like it. Um, still getting my head around, prominent use of purple for a sports team. You don't see that a ton, and I think there's probably a reason for it.
Mm-hmm.
But the uniforms themselves and the caps themselves are just way too busy for my taste, and I
Mm-hmm.
don't think they're well designed.
As far as them being the uniform for the teams, I'm a baseball history guy. I don't care that they made them all standard. I mean, it was fun to see the other
Yeah,
teams, but I
yeah,
get it. This is it's everything's about making money. Everything's about
right,
whatever,
right,
right? So if people don't like them, you're not gonna buy them. I mean, that's
yeah,
fine. But you're right. I don't. I think some of it, the way they did it, was a little
yeah.
kind of slapped together. Not as bad as the hats that came out a couple of months ago. Those were like just
Oh,
really awful.
the clip art hats.
Oh my goodness, I can't even imagine that they produced something like that. Anybody would
Yeah,
produce something like that. It just was just awful. But
the fact that they pulled them as quickly as they did
yeah,
was pretty amazing,
but I wonder
actually.
who sat around and thought these, well, they look good.
Right.
Because none
Yeah.
of because
Someone thought we did it. Great job, everybody.
boy,
Release them into the world.
boy, oh boy. So I'm gonna put up your let's start with your let's see. I'm gonna put up here. So this is your page on Chris Creamer's sportslogos.net, and I have to say, I mean, I have followed everything that he does um, for many, many, many years. I mean, he has been kind of the go-to when it comes to history of seeing historical logos
Mhm.
particularly because I've been into various projects and simulations and things where you're looking for logos from the past, and he has got such a great collection out there.
Yeah.
But that was how I came across this article you wrote on the Portland Rosebuds,
Sure.
which was great. I mean, you tell us a little bit about this one.
So I was really interested to write this one because you've mentioned your interest in the Negro Leagues a couple of times,
Hmm.
and that's definitely something that has really piqued my interest quite a bit in recent years as well. I spoke with Bob Kendrick for the first time in 2019 when the museum released its 100th anniversary of the Negro Leagues logo, and I was just totally taken with him and with that museum,
He's
right? Like
fantastic. Yeah.
he is just spectacular, right?
Hmm.
Spectacular spokesperson for the
Hmm.
game and for that museum and for the history of baseball and for civil rights in America. I mean, just the whole thing.
Hmm.
Um, so I've really become quite interested in the history of Negro Leagues baseball. I've read, the last four books I've read have all been about the Negro Leagues baseball, and so when this league was founded, this Wild Wild West league was founded by the Portland Pickles, who are a
Hmm.
collegiate summer level team. They founded this league with two teams last year, basically just to have baseball to play during COVID-19, because they're members of the West Coast League, which did not
Wow.
play in 2020. So basically, they just said, okay, we're going to do a sort of single site, two-team league, and that league did not yet include the Portland Rosebuds. Um, at the time, they the original plan was for the Pickles to basically wear Rosebuds uniforms, um, yeah, as sort of promotional nights during the 2020 season. This was before the pandemic hit, and so Rob Nyer, and Rob Nyer is
Mm-hmm.
he's an author and a baseball historian. He is very careful to tell me that he is not affiliated with the Wild Wild West League in any way, but he is the commissioner of the West Coast League. So this gets it
Mm-hmm.
gets a little complicated, right? Because the Portland Pickles are in the West Coast League. Rob Nyer is the commissioner of that league. The Portland Pickles started the Wild Wild West League, which is different and separate. Um, Rob Nyer says that he is a friend of the Wild Wild West League. He had been researching the Portland Rosebuds at this point, beginning in 2019, just out of interest and sort of intellectual curiosity. And it was really interesting that they basically couldn't find much information, including really any
Mm-hmm.
photographs. He said they had one photograph that was of a catcher who was wearing a chest protector, and they couldn't see anything on, on the actual uniform. So they had basically very little to no idea of what this team
Mm-hmm.
wore, what their logo was. The story of this team itself was really fascinating. They played
Mm-hmm.
one season 75 years ago, 1946, I think is what year it was.
Mm-hmm.
The team was owned by Jesse Owens,
Mm-hmm.
four-time Olympic gold medalist, um, and Abe Saperstein, who owned the Harlem Globetrotters, actually headed the league. So they've got these big names, associated with this
Mm-hmm.
this Negro League that was based on the West Coast, and it lasted 2 months.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, one of the things about Negro Leagues baseball is, you've most people or many baseball fans, I think, have heard the stories about the really successful teams, the Kansas City Monarchs and the Homestead Grays, and the
Mm-hmm.
big names, the Satchel Pages and Cool Papa Bell and Josh Gibson, right? Like we've heard those names and we know those names, but these leagues had immense obstacles to overcome, and many of them didn't. Many of them failed because they couldn't overcome these immense obstacles.
Mm-hmm.
And it's to their credit that they tried, but it's a statement of the certainly the situation in our country at that time,
Mm-hmm.
that even with names like Abe Saperstein and Jesse Owens, that they couldn't make it 2 months. And so
Mm-hmm.
this is I'm really fascinated by this because here's this team 75 years later trying to tell this story and trying
Mm-hmm.
to say, hey, we want to keep this history alive because even though this team only lasted 2 months, it's an important part of who we were and what this community has, the baseball that has existed in this community. um, so they created this team and this logo that they wanted to be sort of authentic feeling to the time, understanding that they were creating it completely out of thin air.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Interesting.
now they have this Portland Rosebuds team, and the hope that they have is community members are going to see this. This is going to prompt things. You were talking about taking boxes out of your attic and finding things, and their hope is that's happening in Portland right now. People have
That would be
memories.
great.
Their fathers and their grandfathers played on these teams, and so um,
That would be
so
great.
it would be, and so but the fact that you and I are sitting here talking about this team that existed for such a short time is speaks to the success of what they're trying to do, which is to get people talking about it and thinking about it and
Mm-hmm.
understanding what the Negro Leagues were. And and I say in the article, and I when I talked with both Rob Nyer and Alan Miller's the owner of the Portland Pickles. Um, when I talked to them about this, I said, this is really part of a larger sort of resurgence of interest in
Mm-hmm.
Negro Leagues baseball across the country right now. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I love that Bob Kendrick took 45 minutes out of his schedule to talk to me about this. Their 100th anniversary logo. He has carved out time in his day for me a couple of times,
Mm-hmm.
including um, back in 2019. I was visiting Kansas City with my fiance, and we went and we visited the Negro Leagues Museum, and
Nice.
she and I are both members of this association called the National Association for Interpretation, and it's not language, it's heritage interpretation. And so we were doing a presentation at a conference on how they tell the story of the Negro Leagues. And we went there on a Saturday, and I reached out to Bob in advance, and I said, "Hey, we're going to be there. We'd love to talk to you just for a couple of minutes to record some video, and just be able to play, video with you at the museum for attendees of this session that we're presenting at a conference." And he came in. He's famously a big time golfer, right? Like he's always talking about golf. He came in on a Saturday on his way to go golfing, dressed in his fully in his golf gear to come talk to us. And he talked to us for an hour on his way to go golfing. And so it's so funny to me to turn on Sunday Night Baseball and here's
There
Bob
he
Kent.
is. It's
You know,
beautiful, right?
he's all over national TV, but he's also making time to come talk to my fiance and me about the Negro Leagues.
Very
So
cool.
this, the Portland Rosebuds are, if you scrolled for a while, you'd probably find an article that I wrote about the Kansas City Monarchs, being reborn, revived in the American Association as a independent professional team. It probably would take you a while to get to that. I wrote that one a while ago.
There's your
Um,
one on what the Tulsa
yeah,
Drillers. I thought it
I
was
think it's
interesting there that they used the Clowns because there was a black Oilers team that played in the 20s as well. Do you know
mhm.
why they decided to go with T-Town Clowns?
I don't know why they chose that over the Oilers. They came up a couple of times in the comments, people saying, "Oh yeah, there was also the
The Black
Oilers."
Oilers, yeah.
Yeah,
Before
they're
the Clowns, yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
the most famous clowns. I mean, there were a number of Negro Leagues teams called the Clowns.
Mm-hmm.
The most famous one was the Indianapolis Clowns,
Mm-hmm.
who had Hank Aaron on their roster, and then
Mm-hmm.
after he left, they had the first woman, Tony Stone, to play
That's right.
professional baseball.
That's right. Now, the reason why I bring that, the reason why I bring it up, because the first thing that came into my mind, growing up as a kid, the Clowns, and I don't know if they were Indianapolis at the time, but a barnstorming team came through in the 70s through Northeast PA, played some exhibition games against local teams up there. And I remember my dad took me as a kid to go see them, and it was baseball, but it was more like king in his court kind of thing, and
Yeah,
a lot of show
yeah,
and vaudeville type of stuff, and
sure.
and so that as a kid, and I think for many people that kind of sticks in your head that's what the Negro Leagues were all about, and unfortunately, and that's not the case. That was by this time, Negro Leagues were long gone. I think the Clowns were still doing that into the '80s, even in some
Yeah,
in some areas,
yeah,
But that was the first thing I thought of when I saw this. I thought, oh, it's nice they're doing that, but boy, oh boy, they could have picked a different name maybe. Anyway, that's just my take on it because of
yeah.
what stuck in my head from when I was a kid, and I don't know if that was the impression they were going for, but
Yeah.
interesting.
When I think of that name clowns, I mean the comparison that I see drawn most often is to the Harlem Globetrotters.
Hmm.
This sense of
Hmm.
that there was a very much a sort of showmanship about it as well, and
Hmm.
one of the things that I've gleaned from reading about and talking to Bob Kendrick and sort of this interest in Negro Leagues baseball is that it was a different style of play, right? Like it
Hmm.
really was. I've been listening to Bob Kendrick's and the
Podcast, yeah.
podcast that the Negro Leagues Museum does,
Hmm.
and they talk a lot about how it was a flashier style of play, and these what you're seeing now with Tim Anderson and Fernando Tatis and
Hmm.
sort of bat flips and he says that would fit right in, that would be
Hmm.
fit in. And I think um, there's a real sort of progressive feeling about embracing that sort of
Hmm.
flashier style of play in
Hmm.
Major League Baseball right now, and that it does sort of tie back to the style of play that you saw at the height of the Negro Leagues. So
I'm okay with it. There's a lot of people who are not, some
yeah,
baseball
yeah,
purists that think it's a little bit over the top. But
I love it.
there's
Give me
always
more.
been yeah, there's always been the spike and the icky shuffle and you name it in football and all
Right.
kinds of things in basketball. I mean, within
Yeah.
within reason. I mean, it's what people if they like it, then that's okay. I mean,
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm a huge fan of it. Give me more. Give me more.
hmm so this came up when I was talking to Ed the other day. The disco turkeys. Look at that. Now you know what? When I saw that uniform, the first thing I thought of was, and you mentioned it in your article, but the disco night that the White Sox had,
Oh yeah.
where everybody went bananas and
Yeah, storm the field.
stormed the field. Was that for real? Was that what they used?
That's a true story. Yeah,
But
absolutely.
but this
The thing
this
I like
font
about
that they used,
I'm sorry, say that again?
this font that they used was kind of like trying to give a little nod to that.
Yeah,
Cool.
absolutely. Yeah. Well, and I really like what they did with the uniforms because they you can see a heavy sort of Atlanta Braves influence
hmm
from the sort of Hank Aaron to mention his name again.
hmm
But they were very intentional about we're drawing certain elements from certain uniforms that were popular in the 70s, and we're going to sort of introduce those elements
hmm
into into these uniforms. And so that
Boy,
was
I am so glad you told me that story about the Otterbots. Now I know exactly what. I mean, that is really. I mean, it's awesome to know those things. I mean, it really puts a whole new context. That's
it does,
yeah.
it really, and it's the thing that that I really like about it is just sort of understanding that every one of these team names, nearly always, these team names are telling a story.
hmm
Um, and sometimes you'll have, you know, I mean, the one that I sort of point to is like the Sacramento River Cats. I called them and I was hoping to get some, I understand they're on the Sacramento River and the Sacramento River is important, but I was hoping there was some like, we have the biggest population of feral cats in the United States or something like that. And there was nothing. It was just like, hey, cats, could have been river cats, river dogs, whatever. So,
Oh my God.
um,
But
but usually there's some connection that you just didn't know about until you
right.
called them up and asked the question.
That's why it's been so much fun having people like yourself on, and a lot of the historians and authors, researchers, people that have been doing this for a long time that have learned these stories to share some of this and let people find out where they can find out more, because there is just the context and the backstory and perspective is really important, very important in the Negro Leagues to understand everything that was going on, like you touched on
Sure.
when you were talking about the Rosebuds, everything that they had to deal with when it came to segregation and Jim Crow, layered on top of the travel and the barnstorming aspect just to survive and make money.
Sure.
Yeah, there was a lot to it, and people need to
Sure.
understand that context because that's a big thing now. I mean, with the statistics now that Baseball Reference is mixing in, there's people pushing back on, well, why are they adding this? Why don't they keep them separate? And
Right.
you're going to have that debate forever, I
Yeah.
think. But
Yeah.
at some point, that needed to be done. So,
Yeah.
so
Absolutely. Absolutely. And yeah, there are logistical challenges, right? And just the sheer fact of,
mhm.
how well were the records kept. Some of these leagues started and stopped, or players were switching teams mid year, and
hmm
all of that is a function of the challenges those leagues faced, right? And
yeah,
so, um,
and it's going to be an
just the
ongoing effort for sure.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, and fascinating research too.
Oh my
So
goodness, yes.
one of
Yeah.
one of the things that was so important about the Negro leagues, and you see it now in minor leagues, you have to dig a couple of layers to realize what's happening here. But there are probably 11, 12 different minor league teams that have railroad themed logos or team names.
Interesting.
Yeah, and that's a huge function of the fact that in early baseball, and in particular with Negro Leagues teams, that they had to play within basically 10 to 20 miles of
hmm
a railroad station
That's
because that's how
exactly
they
right.
got, yeah,
Yes.
that's how they got everywhere. And so, you still see that heritage reflected now with a pretty high percentage of minor league baseball teams have railroad themed nicknames.
Yeah, it's not like today. People need to put themselves back into 100 years ago.
Right.
There wasn't that nice. You played 3 games here, and you jumped on a plane and you flew over there.
Exactly. Yeah, for
No, I
sure.
mean
Yeah.
there was probably a lot of effort that had to go into trying to coordinate all of that.
Oh
So
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's context. It's important. I love this article too. The food. What is with the food? I mean, the copa I get too, but some of this stuff is just. I mean, it cracks me up. The
Yeah.
Montgomery kimchi. I mean, what on earth?
Yeah, and that's a great one, because they
Oh
tied
my
it to
goodness.
Korean Heritage Night, and you often see minor league baseball teams will do Heritage Nights for a specific ethnicity, and so, but in general, this food
What?
trend started, probably I'm going to get the year wrong, but it was in the mid 2010s,
Mm-hmm.
with the Fresno Grizzlies, who have they have it's a pretty generic nickname, right? Like the Grizzlies is
Mm-hmm.
based on the California Grizzly that you see in the California state flag.
Mm-hmm.
But they just did it one night the first year they did it, but it was wildly successful. They did the Fresno Tacos. Um, and they did this really terrific logo and this really terrific, like, sort of tritone hat with it, and people loved it, right? And it was Fresno claims itself as the taco truck capital of the world, right? Like,
No way.
uh, so they do taco truck night, and they get, like, 10, 15 local taco trucks in there. And so, they had been doing that for a few years, and then they decided we're going to do a one night promotion where we're going to play as the Fresno Tacos. And it was such a huge
Oh, I bet.
success. Yeah, it was an enormous success. And so, teams all over the country, and there's a big sort of rivalry because very shortly after that, the Lehigh Valley Iron Pigs they played as the cheesesteaks,
Mm-hmm.
and you could get wit or wit out, with on the merchandise.
With or
Um,
without.
yeah, and so all these teams started doing, yeah, to the point now where the Delmarva Shorebirds, they were the Scrapple, and there's
Wow.
just, yeah, there's been all sorts of, obviously Buffalo Wings, and there's
The
some
buffalo
that I
wings.
can't, like, yeah, yeah, and
Oh
and
boy.
all of these, the Wisconsin Brats, and so all of these teams are trying to say, okay, what's the
That
what's
is
the
awesome.
local food. And so, yeah, and I want to say
Is
half
there
of
a
minor league baseball has done a promotional night based on food. Most
there's
recently, the one I wrote about most recently, before kimchi, was the Lehigh Valley Iron Pigs again. Just to draw on them one more time, they're playing as the Jimmies,
Oh, I
because
saw that, yeah.
Jimmies versus Sprinkles, and as a Philly guy, I am very much team Jimmies there. Uh, yeah, so that's pretty fun, and that ties in, of course, to my interest with baseball and ice cream,
Awesome. Yes, it sure does, right? The sprinkles on ice cream. Yeah, it sure does.
or Jimmies.
Is there a pierogies? There's got to be a team with a
Yes,
pierogies. Who I knew
yeah.
I knew
There's
you were going to say yes. Who is
there's
it?
absolutely a pierogies, and they're in Wisconsin. Um,
I have to
and
find
I'm
that one.
trying I'm trying to remember which Wisconsin
The
team it is, and I don't want to
pierogies.
get it wrong, so I won't say. But there is a team that goes that's
I'm
the
gonna find
pierogies.
it. I'm
All
gonna have to
right.
find out. Yeah, I grew up with my mother hand making them every holiday, and
Ah,
my goodness, I miss that so much.
they're so
The
good.
handmade ones. But yeah, and then is there pizza too? Or there's got to be a pizza pie
Well,
someone. Maybe
yes.
not. Maybe
The
that's too generic. I don't know.
No, well, kind of. That's pizza with a twist here. It's the Staten Island Yankees, played as the Pizza Rats,
Pizza
and it
rats.
was
Okay.
Pizza Rats, and it was based off the viral video from New York City of a rat literally dragging a slice of pizza down the stairs into the subway, and so
Oh my
that
God,
video went
that's
viral,
funny.
and yeah, and so they're the Pizza Rats.
So I've
Although
got.
they don't exist anymore, they were one of the teams that
Aw,
succumbed to
bummer.
Major League Baseball reorganizing minor league baseball.
So I've got your book up here.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, this has been a couple years. It's been out now,
Yeah.
and I imagine things have probably changed a little bit. But you've got 100 stories, and I think the thing that people really would appreciate in this is that, like we're talking about, some of these are gimmicky, and like we're talking about with the food and some of these other things, but really most of the team names, as wacky as some of them might be, there is an actual real live tie to that
Yeah.
community that makes it meaningful, and that's really really cool.
It it's, and obviously I chose my 100 favorite for this book. There's a Kindle version too that is a lot less expensive.
Okay.
and has about 30 more articles in
I'll
it
probably
because
pick up
I was
that one
able to put
because
them in there.
I love to. Yeah, I'm always watching on my
Um,
phone and things like that. Yeah. Yeah.
but it's yeah, it's really um, it's I had so much fun with it, and I didn't set out to write this book, right? Like it was one of those things where after a couple of years of doing it, I realized I was like, oh, it would be pretty easy to compile
Yeah, you've
to
got the work done. That was beautiful. Yeah,
yeah, it was
I
just
get
I
it.
sort of looked up one morning and I was just like, oh, I have enough content for a book here, and
Cool.
so yeah, so I had fun with it, and I hope
How'd you pick the
you know
100 that you? Because I'm sure you had more than 100 you could have picked from.
I did. I just had to pick the ones that I thought were the sort of the most interesting and the most fun, and the ones that the people would ask about the most. You know the and it wasn't necessarily like the highest level. Sometimes there are AAA teams named after their parent clubs, which I
Mm-hmm.
think should be illegal. Um, and then you've got independent professional teams. I mean, one of my favorite logos and stories is the Joliet Slammers, who play in Joliet, Illinois, right? And they're famous. They're a famous prison town, right? Like, and so they've got this whole
Oh, so
um,
there's a double entendre there,
yeah, the
slammer and
Slammers,
slammers.
right? And
I
so
never would have realized that. That's cool.
yeah. What and double entendres? People love the double entendres in baseball names. You've got the Idaho Falls Chuckers, but the chucker is actually a kind of a bird, and so their logo is this. It's this
Ah,
fat little game bird, basically, but they've turned it into this sort of menacing little guy throwing a baseball, and so, but
chucking a baseball. Yeah,
chucker like the bird, chucker like
chucking a
chucking a
ball. Yeah,
chucking a ball. But
cool.
Joliet is the prison that Jake Elwood was in at the beginning of the Blues Brothers.
Really? How
Yeah.
about that?
So that's another Dan Simon logo, and I know for a fact that Dad Hat Ed has a Joliet Slammers
Yeah,
hat, and it's got their mascot J.L. Bird, which if you say it quickly is Jailbird.
jailbird. Yeah. So you've got over 300. Do you have a wish list, a checklist? How do you? I mean, are you just collect them as you go? How you doing this now?
I'll tell you right now. So there's two right now that have been sort of top of mind, and this was a sort of funny experience for me. My nephew and my niece were at a Phillies game recently, and they were there in some pretty sweet tickets that my brother had access to, but they were right behind home plate during a day game. So I was actually at work, and my brother texts me and he says, "Turn on the Phillies game." And so of course I've got MLB TV, and I turn on the Phillies game, and here's Matthew and Sabrina sitting right behind home plate,
Nice.
and the Phillies just recently this year created a light blue. They've always had the red helmet with the white P
Hmm.
on it, but this year they have a light blue, the powder blue
It's beautiful. I saw a
with the
picture of it.
maroon P, right? It's
Hmm.
beautiful.
Yeah.
So I texted my niece and my nephew, and I was just like, "Hey, go get yourself one of those powder blue helmets." And they're like, "Okay, okay." And which concession stand? And I told them where to go. And so they get there, and they say, my nephew texts me, and he says, "It's green." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He says, "It's green, and it's got fanatic eyes on it." And this was brand new information to me, right? Like this was like huge news in my
I
life that
saw
the
that. You
Phillies had a
put that
new
up.
ice cream helmet.
Hmm.
And sure enough, yeah, they've got a fanatic based ice cream helmet. And so that one's very high on my list, though
Hmm.
my nephew Matthew says that they got me an extra one. It's waiting for me in Philadelphia. They're going to give it to me when I get there for the short trip.
All
So
right.
that's one. But the one that I don't know that it ever even existed, but that just for whatever reason that it feels like a big hole in the collection is the Las Vegas 51s, who don't exist anymore.
Oh,
They're
yeah.
the Las Vegas Aviators,
Hmm.
and they they when they were the 51s, they had this great alien
Hmm.
themed logo for Area 51, which is actually 80 miles outside of Las Vegas, but they switched a few years ago to the Aviators, and they've got all sorts of Aviators helmets. But the one, the sort of the white whale would be if ever,
White whale.
yeah, if ever they did a Las Vegas 51s helmet, that's the one I would love to have in the collection.
Cool. Do teams put out? Well, I mean, you could probably get into this, and there'd be no end to it, right? But do teams put out historical
Yes.
um, helmets like that? They do.
Well, I don't know about historical. Like I've never seen a retro Sunday helmet.
Okay.
Um, but I know that a lot of teams, they do alternate logos, they do different colors.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a Phillies fan, so it sort of pains me to say this, but the Mets have this year they have a whole series of different helmets, and they're very like finely detailed too. It's actually a different style of helmet, and so the Mets, I'll never say this on Twitter, but the Mets have a pretty strong helmet Sunday game this year with all their different versions. Um, but I've never seen, like the Oklahoma City Dodgers. I don't know if they would do an
Mm-hmm.
Oklahoma City Red Hawks helmet now, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
so, I've not seen that.
Interesting. So how many? So there's a couple other guys out there doing this, collecting these helmets like that.
Yeah, and it's funny because they're willing to spend more than I am on eBay. So every once in a while, I'll see
Oh.
an interesting helmet on eBay, and I'll just be like, I know I don't have a chance at it because Jason and Josh are out there too, and they're and they're going for it too. So
Who's got
yeah, there's a community, and we've all sort of found each other on
cool?
Twitter, and there's a Facebook group and that sort of thing, and it's fun because it's good natured, and we all sort of
Mm-hmm.
try to support each other, and
Awesome.
when if one of us goes somewhere, like when I go to the Phillies game, I'm trying to grab a couple extra, the powder blue helmets to make sure I can get them to these guys, and so it's a fun sort of supportive community. But I'll admit, I'll see these collections that these guys have, and I'm a little jealous, and I'm like, man, where'd you get that one? Like,
What? So you cut down to the 100 that were for that
yeah,
first book. You probably got enough information going for volume two here pretty soon, don't you?
there could be a volume two. Yeah, it's especially with the new teams that have been released. I mean, the Appalachian League had 10 new teams that all had to rebrand because they were all named for their parent clubs.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, I think
so
you
it
got
would
to do it.
be
That would be fun.
yeah, it
That
would
would
be
be
it
fun.
would be. It's something that I would want to do. I think.
Yeah. How I know like I just got recently turned on to the baseball mapper
Oh yeah.
that has all of the teams out there that you can find, and there's people out there doing their road trips, and
Yep.
yeah, I think it's great. I think minor league baseball with the affordability and the family atmosphere and the fun
Yeah.
is really something that people, if there's anyone, and most people have got one close by. Get out
Yeah.
there and go see a game, especially now you've been cooped
Yeah.
up for a year.
Right, right.
Get
I'm
on out
gonna
there.
I'm gonna meet the baseball mapper guys in person
Are you really
at
cool?
July 2nd in Missoula at the Missoula Paddleheads. We've got several guys
Awesome.
who I've never met, just know them through Twitter or speaking to them for articles.
That's fun.
Um, and the baseball mapper guys will be there, so I'll get to meet them in person.
That's fun when you do that. I've been
Yeah,
into like baseball simulations and that type of thing for decades. I'm going back to when I was a kid playing Stratomatic, those types of games, and now it's
nice.
all
Oh, that's
computerized
great.
and online and everything else, right? But I have met lifelong friends through that.
Yeah,
And over the time, I've gotten to meet many of them, and it's been great. And when you meet them, because you've been talking with them for such a long time, sometimes on the phone, sometimes online,
yeah,
when you meet them, it's like, hey, great. It's just like you finally get to put
absolutely.
a handshake, a name to a face, and it's really it's a lot of fun. There's so much here that people can get into doing, and like I said,
For
that's why
sure.
I want to get these, try to get these stories out there and let people see all the different things that they can do to have fun with this. Because, like we were talking before we started, something with baseball, they got to get something to get the fun aspect back to it. And, maybe it's, I don't know, it's
Yeah.
reparable. It is.
Yeah, Major League Baseball is doing its part to support minor league baseball by driving people to it, right? Like, I
Right.
mean, I really do, first, I mean, what Major League Baseball did with affiliated minor league ball and eliminating 43 teams and then promoting three independent teams up to the affiliated level, like
Hmm.
the fact that there's 25% less minor league baseball out there now, affiliated minor league baseball. um, you know, I think this was before we got on the broadcast. I was telling you how I've got a Fourth of July trip planned,
Hmm.
and I'm going to go see four Pioneer League games. And last year, or well,
Fun.
last year didn't happen, but 2 years ago, that would have been short season single A, and now it's independent professional league, and
Interesting.
it's a whole different world out there for these teams. And so, yeah, it's Ed made the point that you're really supporting small businesses when you go
Right.
support minor league baseball, and
That's
it's
right.
very much the case. And so, I'm looking forward to doing that with. It's going to be me and my two kids driving through. We're going to go to a game in Billings, the Billings Mustangs, and then the Missoula Paddleheads, and then the Great Falls Voyagers, who have a fantastic alien themed logo
Yep.
because one of the most famous alien sightings happened in Great Falls, Montana, with grainy footage that was actually shot from the baseball field where they
Oh
actually
wow.
play right now. So they've got
Wow.
this great little alien logo,
Hmm.
and then Idaho Falls, and on the 4th of July in Idaho Falls, they're having me throw out the first pitch. So
You
I'm
were
really
throwing
very
out the.
excited.
Oh, you got it. You got to put that on and let everybody see that. That
Oh,
is
that'll
that.
absolutely, yeah,
That'll be fun.
yeah.
Very cool. That's awesome. Good for you.
Well, thanks, I
Very
appreciate it.
cool. That is fun. Yeah, people. I encourage people to get out there. Check out a local game. Support the businesses in the community around it. There's a museum. There's something that has something to do with that town, that city, that team. The Negro League Baseball Museum. There's a Negro League Baseball Museum in Birmingham, Alabama. There's one in
Hmm,
Jacksonville, Florida. There's one in Union Mills, Maryland. If people don't
hmm,
realize, I mean, there's little places like that everywhere, and it would
yeah.
be, if people can get out there and like help support some of these.
That museum that you reference in Birmingham is really high on my wish list. I know it's connected to the field where the Barons play,
Hmm.
and they had the Black Barons there in Birmingham, and so yeah,
Oh yeah.
that's high on my wish list. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say the annual baseball palooza trip with my college buddies this year is we're basing it out of Kansas City, and so we're
Cool.
actually going to start on the first day with a visit to the Negro Leagues
Awesome.
Museum.
Nice.
Um, and one of the other people I want to mention there, we've mentioned Bob Kendrick, but I got the chance to work with their digital marketing strategist, Kiana Sinks,
Hmm.
who is, I don't know if you've gotten the chance to
Kiana I
interact
have
with her.
spoken with several times.
Great.
She is a lot of fun. Yeah.
She is fantastic. And we
Hmm.
actually had her for the association that I work for. We had her come on and keynote one of our conferences.
Nice. Cool.
So yeah, so she was great. But yeah,
Awesome.
so we're going to start there, and we're going to go to the museum, and I get to meet Kiana in person finally.
Cool.
And then we're going to go to the Wichita Wind Surge, and the Oklahoma City Dodgers, and the Northwest Arkansas Naturals, and then back to the Kansas City Monarchs on the last day. So
Cool.
we're going to support some more small business that way too.
Absolutely. That's really cool, man. I'm sure you'll have a great time, and I hope the weather's good for you. And
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, nice. Well, thank you, sir. This was great. Anything else you got on your mind? Anything upcoming that you wanted to? Well, you told us about your upcoming
Yeah, the
trips and
road trip's the
things.
big deal, right? Like
Yeah.
that's I've got I do
Do another
a
book.
well, I'd love it. Yeah, I definitely want to do another book, but I really no, I appreciate Chris giving me the chance to write for sports logos, and my main responsibility there now is to sort of cover news about minor league baseball. There's fewer of the stories behind the nickname articles and more of the just sort of like the covering promotional nights or
Cool.
temporary identities and that sort of thing. So I really have fun writing for Chris, but I also just love, the one thing that I would ask is when people go to a baseball game and they have a helmet Sunday, tag me on Twitter and I'll retweet you. I am all about retweeting pictures of people eating ice cream on Twitter.
Awesome. I love the logo with the baseball and the ice cream with the helmet. What helmet is that? That's on that on Twitter. What helmet is
Oh,
that?
that's the Chuckers actually.
That's a Chuckers. Okay.
Yeah, they were doing they did this thing where they said, "Show us your profile picture and we'll fix it." And they were just being funny, right? And so everybody's
Hmm.
profile picture, they were just putting their logo over their face, basically. And and so I said, okay, here's mine. And so they took mine and they put their logo on the helmet Sunday on that baseball. And so I just said, you know what, that'll be my new profile picture. And then they said, and that was actually right around the time when they were like, hey, if you make it here to a game, we'll let you throw out the first pitch. And and so
Cool.
I
That
said,
is
all
cool.
right.
Paul, I got to say that whoever drew that on that baseball, they did a pretty good job of
Yeah,
with
that was
with the
that was some
caricature.
That was some players with the West Michigan Whitecaps who did that.
No, it was a player who did that. Who
Yeah, it
was
was a
it?
player who did it.
Who was it?
I don't know who the player was.
He.
I have,
That is funny. That's
yeah.
classic. That's classic.
Yeah. No, they did a great job with it. They did.
Where is that thing? Is that
It's
ball
still
around
in
some?
West Michigan. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I did not take the ball.
Oh, they kept the ball. Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Paul, this was fun. I appreciate your time. Like I said, I would love to get more stories out with people like you. I've had on, like I said, artists, researchers, the historians, preservationists, some of the work that people have been doing and the passions that they have. I just think it's a lot of fun to get it out there, get it in front of people who maybe don't know about them, who I think should. That's what I'm trying to do here. So I appreciate you taking the time. This was a lot of fun.
Well, Philip, thanks so much for the work that you're doing. It's I've really enjoyed getting introduced to this show, and I'm learning some things, and I will definitely be following from here on out.
All right, man. Thank you, Paul. You have a great day, and
You,
enjoy your trips and down the road, man. I'd love to get you back on here, and when you get back on here, tell us about
absolutely.
your trip. That'd be fun.
I will come on anytime. I appreciate it.
All right, Paul. Thank you. You have a good rest of your day.
Thank you, Philip.
All
Take
right.
care.
Bye bye.
And go Phils.
Go Phils. Yeah.